Go.
I'm Jake,
I'm Matt.
and today we're going to talk about different joints in the body. Do you want to start that?
Yeah, there's three classifications of joints. One's the fibrous, well, that is the cranium, the ribs and the sternum. There's cartilaginous, which is slightly movable, and all that really is the vertebrae. And there's synovial, which is freely movable, and that's your shoulder and knee.
Your synovial joint is different from all the others because this one obviously is freely movable. So in your synovial joint, like there's a membrane, which is called the synovial membrane, which releases synovial fluid like between the two bones, and that like helps with movement, and like if you jump off something or you jump high, then it like breaks your fall. The same as on the knee or any other synovial joint. There's a layer of cartilage as well, which will help with like soften your fall. So there's 6 types of synovial joint. There's a ball and socket, which is your shoulder or your hip, which, as I said before, like it'll be held together with 2 ligaments, and then between that will be your synovial membrane and your cartilage. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, there's your hinge joint, which is either your elbow or your knee, where it's just basically on your elbow. It's held together by ligaments and 2 bones, with 3 bones, but it has to be at least 2, and that's your ulnar radius and humerus.
There's your pivot, which like one is your neck, because you can move it to side and then up or down. So it's like the top of your vertebrae, which is your cervical vertebrae.
And there's your condyloid, which is just basically your wrist, your carpals, and it's when just basically have small bones gliding over each other, and you don't really use that in sport that much, unless you do tennis or golf.
A saddle joint is basically a modified condyloid. So an example would be your thumb. So you've got a bone which is sort of arced, and then that'll sit in. Then like the first carpal, your phalange, that'll sit into that bone. So you'd use that in sports like darts. So like when you yeah yeah. That one.
Oh, the one that I said before, that was your gliding joint. I got it mixed up. Your condyloid is just a bit like your saddle. It's like your wrist joints, and like the lower part of your fingers just like sit in each other's cups. It's more or less exactly the same as saddle.
Yeah, so at these joints there's different types of movement which like occurs in obviously all your different joints. First one would be flexion. So an example of that would be if a football player kicks a ball, he bends his leg first, then that strikes through, and then straightens his leg, which is called extension. So together that's flexion and that's extension.
Abduction, which is basically moving your limbs away from the body, so that would be abduction. You would use this in sport, say, sorry, if you were like playing cricket or something and you went to just bowl, like you have a batsman, you swing your arm forward and your arm's going away from the midline of the body. And what would be adduction is taking your limbs towards the midline of your body. So that's abduction, and that's adduction.
So next is rotation, and with rotation it's not doing like a full circle, it's like sort of a swaying. So if you imagine like say like a pirate ship at Oak Tower or something, like you'll go like that. Yeah, so if you think in the shoulder, like your ball and socket, that's sort of a rotation. And you'd use that in sports like you say golf, like with your swing. And bowling as well, you'd use it there, because like obviously, yeah.
Basically circumduction is fully rotating the joint. It's a bit like rotation, but this time you do it all the way. So basically rotation would just be like that, and circumduction would just be all the way, like if you do it on the shoulder.
Next is supination, and this happens in your hands. So supination is where your hands are out flat and say facing up, like your palms of your hands are facing up. And a good way to explain this is carrying a bowl of soup. And then there's a pronation, which is basically the same but this way. Yeah, and then so the sort of thing that you'd use this in would be again like a cricket ball. So you start like that, and then you'd bring your hand over, and then that's different. So you've got there, this is supination, and then that's pronation. Right, the next ones are in the ankles only. And
it's just basically dorsiflexion, which is, I'll stand here doing because it's easier. It's just basically when you've got your toes facing up like this, and the other one is called...
Do that again, Matt, I didn't see that.
Dorsiflexion is just basically when your feet are pointing up like that, and the other one, which is plantarflexion, is just when your feet are pointing towards the ground, as if to say, like towards the plantars, and easy way to memorize it. But you wouldn't really do that in many sports.
Next is a hyperextension, and this is like, it can be common in injuries as well, that you can say hyperextend your knee. So basically hyperextension, so if that's extension, extending it over what it should be is hyperextension. So like, you wouldn't be able to use it in a sport, but it's quite common with injuries. So say like quite a lot of football players hyperextend the knee, so when they kick, like you overdo it and it sort of does pull the knee joint. Next is a inversion and eversion, which I'll stand here for. So with your feet, like when you invert your feet, which is inversion, you sort of have your soles of your feet facing in. So like, and then obviously eversion is the opposite, and like obviously it looks a bit stupid, but because you wouldn't be able to use that in a sport, but it's again common with an injury, so such as rolling your ankle, then because you'll obviously invert your foot and it'll damage your ankle joint. Yeah,
That's basically it.
yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.